Good afternoon. Welcome to the B&H virtual event space. You are tuned in to find your voice. Don't force it. We're having a conversation today, and this is aiming to be what I think is going to be a very inspirational conversation. I've known Daniel virtually for quite some time now. We met in a Facebook wedding photographers group, which is, I look at Facebook groups as like community pools. You can go there, get a nice swim. Sometimes you go and the water's a little too toxic to get into. But you always learn something. You always get something out of it. It's always an experience. And I've gotten a friendship out of this with Daniel and also professional relationship that is kind of manifesting itself here today. So Daniel had reached out and asked, "Hey, how do I speak for what you do at the event space?" And we started the conversation, and I wanted to do this today as an interview style conversation because I've gotten to see Daniel come to where he is today, his growth as a person, as a photographer. And I just think he has such a cool, humble, every person story of putting in the work and really just, you can't, there's no substitute for hard work and staying at it and finding yourself in doing what you love. So, Daniel, I hope that laid it out. Was that pretty accurate? A good summation of how we came to be?
It's pretty spot on. It's totally spot on.
So let's just dive in. We're
Sure.
talking about finding your voice and not forcing it, which is, it takes time, right? When we force things, we get into something, we try to do things overnight. We try to skip the processes that lead to success in a natural fashion. So how did you get started? How did your journey into photography and more specifically wedding and portraiture begin?
So it's really interesting because where I am now made absolutely no sense, was not even on the radar years ago. So it all started, honestly. My brother got me a little, I think it was a Kodak point and shoot in about 2003. And I'm like, thanks. He goes, trust me, I think you'll enjoy it. And he was a hobbyist and he wanted to turn me on to something. So I had the camera and honestly just lived in the glove box of my car for I don't even know how long. And one day I drove past this abandoned house. I'm like, that looks really cool. So I pulled over, went out and took a picture of it, put it back in my car, kind of semi forgot about it until one day I saw the camera in the glove box, took it in the house, took the memory card, put it in the computer, opened it up. I'm not kidding. In Microsoft Paint, right? And I click to turn it to black and white. And I go, oh my God, look at the sun peeking through the trees and like, look at the lines of the house and the way the shadows are falling. And I literally said to myself, if I knew what I was doing, this would be really cool. So, so that camera came with me everywhere, like family get-togethers, any, drives I would take, like, I learned to love revisiting the Sunday drive of what people did decades ago. And I would go through the hills of Hunterdon County, just looking for like farmland and like hills and just like interesting stuff and take pictures of it. And that's where the passion for it grew, or the connection. It's just something that spoke to me, and it slowed me down, and it gave me a whole new way of seeing the world. Like I've been drumming since I was 10. I've been cooking. I was a professional personal chef for a long time. Like everything I have always enjoyed has been some kind of sensory input and then output back into the world. So after having that experience, I remember thinking in my head, so I shoot everything but people, right? So talking about Facebook and social media, the only reason I initially joined Facebook was because I wanted to take my photos of soda bottles and cows and like whatever, and try and find a place to sell prints. And then also, hey, maybe I could find local people and do family sessions. Like I want to do $100 family sessions. Sorry, cat hair. It's a gift. Wow. So that's kind of where that started. And I did that first like family session and looked at the photos and my brain hurt. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. I don't understand. Like everything, scenery looks good, but like, how do I figure out how to make people look good? And, we could be talking in any kind of room in a dark bar, right? And like in real life, you look like a person and I know what you look like. But if you took a picture of that and put it on, printed it out or whatever, you'd be like, that looks like crap. So it was learning how to go, okay, how do I want the scenery to look? More importantly, how do I want the person to look? And that was where the journey the journey started. But can I tell you the story about how that world, that universe, all of a sudden just can't, displayed itself to me?
Totally. Totally. That's what we're here for.
Awesome. Awesome. So I joined this Facebook group, this wedding Facebook group, wedding photography Facebook group, that a friend of mine said, hey, you should join this. At that time, it was actually the first thing I was doing where I was regularly photographing people, and it was shooting little league teams. So, the kid would come up one after one. And what the company told us was literally put your camera in professional mode, or, program mode, angle the flash at them in TTL. So everything's automatic, and just do that. So one of my coworkers there said, hey, you should join this group. It's really cool. So I join it thinking like I have all this landscape and art stuff, and like I'm the bee's knees, right? And I see what they're posting there, and I'm like, oh my God. Wow, no, total intimidation, right? And they would post get-togethers and, hey, come and we're going to bring a couple and we're going to do this and that and learn about lighting. And I'm just like, nope, nope, I don't belong here. These people are going to see, if I show up, they're going to look at me and be like, who are you? So it took me a long time, to then dip my toes in, so to speak. And a couple people, they saw me posting and they're like, a couple people reached out and they said, hey, if you want to assist me at a wedding one day, let me know. And I turned down opportunities because, again, just total imposter syndrome, which is probably going to come out of my mouth another 90 times in the next hour. But
Was it, Daniel, can I ask you, was it more
yeah.
about you or more about what you were seeing from them? Was it like, I'm not good enough, or what they're posting is so good that was it
Well,
this intimidation?
I mean, as an assistant, I knew I wouldn't be expected to photograph anything. It was just, I had a camera since 2003. I had a camera. I consider myself a photographer because I had a camera. I liked taking photos of what I like taking photos of. But these people are earning a living doing it, and they can handle so much more than how do I get a photo of the soda bottle. So I had that imposter syndrome of they forgetting that people are human, and forgetting that they would view me as a human. Just that in my head, it was like, they're going to think they're professionals. And like, this dude is like, it's just some random dude here holding, helping with my gear. And it was just a realm I didn't know and was terrified of. So it finally came down to someone who I respected in the group. My friend Dave, he posted in the group looking for an assistant. And I was like, you know what, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. So I took a deep breath and I responded like, hey, I'd love to do this. And, so we said, okay, we had a quick chat about like what to expect, or rather just, what he expected from me. And he's like, if you want to bring your camera along for times I don't need you, come along, play, it'll be good. And I went there, and this is where the journey started. And, almost everything that I know and everything that resonates within my being as a wedding photographer, it all traces back to that day. First of all, the wedding, he had photographed the groom's brother's wedding. So showing up there, he knew everybody. He knew a lot of people, and they knew him. And first thing right there, it's not about being a photographer. It's not about a customer or a client or a product or an end result. It was about the human experience. And how that ties in, I'll jump back, I promise, but how that ties into how I view what I do today is I tell my clients, it's not a photo shoot, it's a wedding day. And it comes down to their experience and wanting them to just have the best day ever without feeling like I'm in the way or I'm stopping them too much. But it also goes out to everyone who's there. So, there's that hour-long chunk of the day where it's time for family photos and bride and group, the wedding party. And, the way that I plan my timelines is everyone there is there celebrating. No one's there lined up for a photo shoot. So, when I get reviews, people will talk like this much about the photos and this much about the experience, right? And a lot of what they say is, everyone there said he wasn't even in the way, and we had a great time and the photographer was friendly, but what that means is I recognize during family photos, it's not a minute per photo. Like there's three people over here that haven't seen each other in 5 years and they're talking, and these people are taking selfies, and it's about managing the day and making sure that the 150 people there are having a wedding day. And at the end of it all, oh, by the way, there's some really cool photos too. So I learned that family and community aspect. It's a people business. You
Mm.
know, it's a people business as much as it's an art business or a storytelling business or a service business. So I got to see that. Then while I was watching him photograph, it was again how he interacted with the people. And then I slowly started seeing how he saw light and how that tied into making people look good in the photos. And I'm like, oh, well, that's kind of cool. So jump towards the reception in a dark room. You know, I had my camera, I had that flash that I used, you know, for the baseball photos, but never learned how to use it. Like what's bounce flash? Oh my God, I'm freaking scared, right? So starting in the reception, he had me holding a flash on a monopod, and people are entering the room, and I'm walking at the same speed backwards so that every time he took a photo, that flash would hit them from the same distance. Um, and I was just like, oh wow, this is how you make people look good in photos. Because we would do some test stuff, and then he'd show me on the back of the camera, and I was like, this is how this works. I can do this. I have no idea how, but like this all makes sense to me, and everything changed. Later on in the evening, again, he wasn't using me as a shooter, so he's like, hey, just go mess around. So I had that flash and my camera, and I put the flash on, and I'm just like taking a photo and like looking like, what did this do? How did this work? Whatever. And I'm doing stuff. And then one time I look up like this, and there he is with the bride and groom and the other couple from, you know, whose wedding he shot, and they're standing there like this. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Oh my God. And I'm like, I mean, this is on a split second, right? So I just like go up, take a picture, and sure enough, like the bounce flash made them look good, and like they have that photo. And I'm like, all right, if I, similar to that very first photo, that abandoned building, I'm like, if I knew what I was doing, this would be really cool, because here it is, it works. I have gear that can do that. And from, wow, sorry about that. From there, it was, that's where the hunger started. That's where the hunger started. So from that day forward, I took any assistant gig I could get. Um, you know, and I saw and learned about a million different ways to skin a cat, right? Like everyone approaches the day, or every section of the day, or every environment completely differently. I worked with photographers who used a lot of lighting. I worked with purely natural light photographers and saw how they would position people with the sun, or, you know, in shade and stuff. And, you know, after, you know, working with, you know, just say 100 different people, if I took 10 things away from all those experiences, it was awesome. And now I had those things in my tool bag. And that's when I just started to feel a little more comfortable. Not so much so where like, no, I wasn't ready to start my own business or anything like that. But that's what gave me the inspiration to second shoot. And it wasn't something that I sought out particularly, but people saw, you know, I would post photos in that Facebook group. And then I had a couple of people reach out to me, and they go, listen, yeah, no one I even knew. I didn't really know anyone yet. And they just saw, hey, we saw what you've been posting in the group. Why don't you come along? And I'm like, sure. So I started kind of like as a third shooter assistant. And then those same people said, all right, why don't you second shoot for me? And it was, you know, being in that group, reading posts and looking at stuff and starting to understand what it is that's expected of a second shooter. You know, first time, nervous as nervous could be. But then, you know, again, I took that as an opportunity to learn the ropes, and to not just be in my own head and my own, oh, this is what I'm doing. I'm watching what the lead photographer is doing and how they're interacting and how they're managing the day. And I was fortunate to work with some great people who knew that I had skills, you know, as it's progressing. And they're like, hey, if there's something you see, if you want to set up a portrait, like go for it. And it got to a point where one of my friends who I shot with 50 times minimum. He goes, I know when I see that light bulb on over your head, and then I just turn to you and go, hey, whatever it is, go for it. So as a second shooter, I still didn't fully grasp that it wasn't just about art, right? So I'm sitting there just going, this person's giving me the keys to the Ferrari. They're like, just go ahead, swing for the fences, make some cool stuff. So coming from someone who was just into like landscape and art stuff, I always thought it was about the power image, the just the huge visual impact images. So sure, that's how I cut my teeth portraiture wise, which is kind of cool because I was able to do that with absolutely zero pressure, no styled shoots, not like paying people to like, can you come here with me this day and I want to try this? Like it was in the fields,
It was
like,
organic,
yeah, it
very
was totally
organic
organic.
process.
So I'm like, all right, cool. I've got the portrait stuff nailed. But then it was, how do I turn it into everything else? Which people started pointing out to me, this is important. This is important. This is important. Um,
Can I stop you right there for a second? Because
yeah,
I think you're hitting on something that I think is very important in this whole idea of finding mentors and finding lead shooters who are willing to not only take you under their wing, but I think a huge part of you really having that experience with Dave is goes beyond Dave's experience as a wedding photographer. It goes beyond your inexperience. It's about Dave as a person
yeah,
and how Dave made you feel. Dave gave you a level of comfort where I look at it as similar to dancing, someone who doesn't know how to dance and
me.
they get pulled onto the dance floor and having the right lead makes all the difference between I look like an idiot out here, I'm uncomfortable and it shows, and someone who's just like, who cares? Just have fun with it. And they make you feel comfortable. And next thing you know, you're catching a beat and you have a little bit of rhythm. And it doesn't matter if you're just two-stepping, you have the right lead. And I think that Dave was the right lead. So can you talk about you've worked with, you said hundreds of people.
Yeah.
You have some people who are a great fit and some people who you might learn something from, but it probably was a little bit more of an uncomfortable process where it's just like, okay, maybe we don't jive that well, but I'm here. I'm going to make the best of it. So can you talk about for people who are out there who are in early Daniel Nydick's shoes, is it important to just take on any second shooter gigs and kind of build that experience? Or should you be looking at only a certain type? Like in your experience, what did you find was more beneficial? Was it reps or was it quantity over or excuse me, quality over quantity?
So that's an interesting question, which actually it's an answer that applies to a lot more things. Um, we're human, right? We learn the hard way. We all learn the hard way. And it's up to us to fall down and then to decide whether to stay there or to get back up and try it again, right? So in the industry, we're going to talk red flags. So currently, I can see red flag clients, right? And talk about, when I say red flag, it's just not the right fit. I tell all my prospective clients, you deserve the perfect fit, even if it isn't me. So I learned that similarly as a second shooter or an assistant. It vibe matters. Vibe matters in everything. So I would tell people, do something, work with someone. If it doesn't work for you, don't work with them again. But this is how you learn. Um,
Makes sense.
yeah, yeah. No, it is that simple. I would say take anything as long as it's not something that like is going to hurt you, like physically hurt you. Networking, community, friendship, like this stuff is all important. And I can't tell you how many people I've met and how many people have enriched my life because I worked with them, because I reached out or they reached out.
Mm.
Um,
And you're not always going to have the people that you jive with. And I think that goes for, I mean, I'm sure you've had clients where you jive with them and everything, but something happens on the day of, or a wedding day is a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. It can bring a certain side out. The pressure gets, or you have a relative that you hadn't dealt with, and
yeah.
it becomes, asserts himself on the day of.
But I will say energy attracts energy, right? And I was very fortunate to work with a ton. I'd say 99% of my experiences of working with people that were just great. And, I I capitalized on that, throughout the day, seeing how comfortable it was and how they treated me as a human felt good. And when I had days like that, again, I was hungry and I wanted to learn. So I might have just been assisting and not shooting, and they'd say, okay, there's just like 2 hours of dancing left, you can go home. And I tell them, I have my lighting gear in the car, can I set up reception lighting and practice? And they go, yeah, go for it. Like,
That's awesome.
back to that first assisting gig real quick. All the tips that I learned that day and through the friendship that he and I have, his thing was just, hey, dude, just pay it forward. So, again, then having those assisting opportunities where they're like, sure, go ahead and play around. I carry that with me. So anyone who assists me, anyone who second shoots me, I talk through like my process as I'm doing everything because, well, number one, it's going to help them help me better, which is true. But if I can open someone's eyes to something that they hadn't seen or never thought of before, now their world is bigger, their tool bag, their toolkit is bigger, and they have more within themselves that they can explore. And I don't care what industry you're in, you hear about community versus, community over competition or whatever. Yet in the back of people's minds, they're still like, no, 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 I need to take care of me. But like, I'm going to tell everyone the universe is abundant and there is enough for everyone to be successful. There's enough energy, there's enough room out there for anyone and everyone to be successful. It's just about finding your voice. Don't be afraid when you fall to get back up. And you know what? Even if you fall 17 times, it's not going to work. Nothing's going to work unless you keep getting up. And the scariest part is getting up that first time. So I am not going to lie. Like, I still show up to every wedding. Like, I wake up the morning of and I'm like this. What if I don't do something right? What if I don't do well? And the nerves driving there and getting my gear ready and getting ready to walk in to be like, hey, how are you? It's so good. So great to see you. I'm just as jittery now as I was on day one, but I will tell you, after having all those tools and all the, the hierarchy of like what I want to do, what I want to capture. And then if there's room, how do I do this? And how do I do that? As soon as I pick the camera up, my brain just goes, shh, it's okay. And but that comes with time.
Was there something else besides time? What was because obviously we heard how you started. You're sitting here now on, speaking in front of thousands of people virtually, and you're a Magmod ambassador. You're a successful photographer who has your own business. What was the turning point for you?
Wow.
Was there any one thing, or was it?
Honestly, the biggest thing was that first assistant gig. And I know that sounds silly, but it's like, that's where it just all made sense. That's where it was like a curtain was lifted and they said, oh, by the way, there's a whole other universe right on the other side of where this curtain has been. I'm sure I could pick up something here and there. Well, it might not be an exact literal, it was this moment, but learning to tell stories, that was another thing that I didn't really understand. I thought it was just about taking photos, but there are so many people whose work I admire, and what it was either really, really just like kick butt portraiture, or photos that just feel like you're watching a movie, even though it's a snap. And understanding how to read a room, like these are things that take time. Like I can list this all out and give it to anyone watching, but until you do it all and then add the next step and add the next step, then it just becomes kind of in your brain. So instead of just, oh, here's someone getting their makeup done, here's their shoes, here's people matching pajama shots or whatever, it's being able to pull back and read a room and see that there's something going on over there. There's you hear them starting to tell a story, and you see the person on the other side of the conversation start to crack a smile, and you just start to learn there's going to be a laugh. There's going to be something happening there. And you start gravitating over so that you're available to capture that moment, because, my job is to give people photos of memories, photos of moments, especially the ones that they didn't know were happening. Like, that's the whole, here's your immersive gallery of the story of your day. And like, that's what gets me excited. So in hindsight, what got me excited was here's 3 great photos using like really fun lighting. And it like, yeah, sure. Now that's part of my thing, that attracts couples to me. But it's about the story. Like I don't have enough photos of my family, right? As a child. My parents had put up pictures on the ceiling in the house we lived in Philly until I was 4. And but then we moved and the photos are gone because they were stuck to the like glued to the ceiling, and I think they got painted over. So, to me, everything I do, everything I've ever done professionally or otherwise, is just operating from a place of connecting and wanting to enrich someone's life in the smallest way, like walking down the sidewalk, you make eye contact, you either look away or you just nod and smile. And it's just as easy to nod and smile. That person now has a smile on their face too. So I don't know. It's just all, to me, it's all about just being human. And my role as a human in the role of a wedding photographer is how do I give these people something that's just going to be there in their hearts forever?
I think that's such a great avenue that to go down. And we talked about this when we talked before, is that idea of just being a human. And I
Yeah.
thought it was so cool how that, to me, in talking to you, was kind of like where you differentiated between being a wedding photographer and realizing, hey, I'm just a guy. I'm just a person. And I think that you connecting to how you connect to your clients as just people is such a huge thing that people overlook. They look at it as a customer or a client relationship, and it's really not. It's just two people. And you used an example when we spoke the other day about shooting bridal prep, which I thought was really cool. So I want to kind of take you back to that moment and to you doing bridal prep, especially early on as a lead shooter, because newsflash for guys out there, it's foreign to us, for a lot of us, even the married men. It's like we're separated, we're locked over here, and it's like there's such a different idea between groom prep and bridal prep.
No,
And
you hit it right on the head. So, for people who don't know or who are getting into doing this, so as a second shooter, pretty much all the time, that means you start the day with the guys and the lead starts the day with the girls. So yeah, it's totally easy to pal around with guys who are sitting there and like doing shots and, having fun because I'm just one of the guys. And granted, this is not to not acknowledge that there's a challenge that women second photographers face with men. Where for them it's easier to connect with, to walk into a room with brides and women and connect. Like it's just, gender things are gender things sometimes, and guys are happy to welcome in a dude, and because I can walk in there and be like, hey dudes, what's up? But then going into bride prep, I felt totally awkward. Like, why is there this man in this room with us? And it once I remembered who I was as a person and their people, and I'm here to take care of them, it helped. It helped loosen that up. And again, once I just started operating from the place of telling stories, like, yes, there are details to photograph. There's inanimate objects to photograph, like shoes and rings and stuff. But once I just initially, bonded with my clients beforehand so that I'm not just a vendor, I am a human just like they are, then I also got that imposter syndrome out of my head of why is he here? He shouldn't be here. Like, no, these people want me here. These people like me. So I'm going to go in there with this big smile and just give them the best that I can give them. But it was a personal learning curve, just because, the energy's different. Don't get me wrong. It's just as much fun, but girls doing girl things, when does a guy get to experience that? Until he does. And it took a little while. And I do even remember saying my first year or two, like, man, groom prep is so much easier. Why can't it be the other way around? But now I just, I go back to who I am as a person, and these are just people. These are just people having a great time, and they invited me there to tell their story.
it's funny with groom prep. I think it's always just gets discarded like, yeah, the pictures are great. Yeah, we don't care. We don't care what we look like. Guys being guys. And it's like all the pressure, especially in North American culture And in northeastern North America culture, if you guys haven't been to a northeast wedding, if you're from another area that, like, yes, people will spend like life savings over here for a wedding. So it's like that bridal prep is like, that's key. And
Yeah.
if you are tuning in from across the world or across the country and you have a different experience, or if you guys have any questions you want me to throw out to Daniel, we'd love to hear your perspective as well. We always, even in an interview, we always like to mix it up and hear what the people think and what the people have to say. But that sounds like that is, I mean, that's probably from a comfort standpoint, as a like a real person, like wedding photographer or not, like real person. It's like that's an intimate moment, and that
Yeah.
is a very personal and very. I mean, that's why you see a lot of bride prep. There's a lot of tears. There's a lot of emotion, and that's just added pressure. And I think you breaking it down to, I'm just a person at the end of the day. I'm a person. They're people. I love how you use the word vendor, because there's no more uncomfortable word of like you're just a hired person than vendor. And it's like, yeah, vendor is like, ugh, makes you sound so like I'm here today, gone tomorrow. But
Yeah.
being a person, it's like you're creating part of, like, you're the fabric of the quilt of their special day.
Yeah. And I may have changed it. I was playing with my Instagram profile recently, but like you have like your little 4 lines of text you could put in there, and one of them either was or still is, you want a human, not a vendor, right? And
It's
it's
true.
true. I had a consult last week, and she told me I was the first photographer that she met with that didn't make it feel like a business meeting slash sales meeting. And I don't know if some people become complacent or that's just how they run their business. But to me, I spend time on our calls just chatting like this, and I know I said it before, but I'll tell everyone, if you deserve your perfect fit, even if it isn't me, and chatting and connecting as people is how we find that out,
Now,
you
what
know?
about the dynamic, the tie-in of, at the end of the day, yeah, you're a person, which means when the cameras go back in the bag, when you leave the venue, Daniel Nydick is a person. Daniel Nydick still has to find himself as a person, which reflects on Daniel Nydick, the photographer. So can you talk a little bit about your process just as a person? How does that tie into what you do as a wedding photographer? Because, as someone who, if you have somebody who's a 20-year-old single bachelor out there photographing someone's most important day, they might not understand the full gravity of what they're documenting. And you're always going to have people who are just talented creatively, and they're always going to get brilliant shots. But I think we've differentiated between the aesthetic portion of photography and the storytelling. So can you
Yeah.
talk about your process in finding yourself as a person and how that relates to you as a photographer?
So it's actually it's actually kind of cool. Um, I'm the most sentimental person I think I know. And part of this has been, well, yeah, I mean, since I met her, being with my wife has actually brought a lot of that out. Wanting to document our own stories, I would bring, so for work, and I hate even calling it work, so for weddings, I have Canon gear, and they're full-sized cameras and full-size lenses. But when my wife and I started traveling, first time traveling together, I bought myself, at the time, a Fuji X-T2. Now I have a couple of X-T3s, and like Fuji has like these little nugget sized lenses. And I brought that stuff in like a little bag, a plastic tripod, one flash, one transmitter, and a little nano stand for the flash. And we're in like England, Hawaii, Australia, you name it. And I wanted to document our story and our lives and our love, because, actually, I don't know which is chicken or egg right now, because being in weddings, I learned, oh my God, photos of memories and emotion and people are so important. So I think obviously everything I've done through my wedding career has its place in where it got me, but understanding that and then having that value in my own life, like we have professional photos of everywhere we've been with lighting and like everything, but like I document our love story everywhere. So that's the me that I bring to a wedding day, because if it's important to me, then I believe it's important to my clients, and of course it is, because they hired me to do that. So me just again, just going back to being that sentimental mush, it's I feel like this is the perfect industry for me. You know, I never went to photography school. I never took any classes. You know, I told you my brother gave me that camera. He was a hobbyist and loved it. I didn't know till well after I was into this that my grandfather was an avid photographer back in, feels like the 1800s by now, but early mid 1900s. And my mom told me a fun story of, we would go out for a drive and he would see a tree here and a cloud here, and he'd pull over the car, get out his camera, and he goes, okay, we're waiting until the cloud gets here so he could take the photo. So I've had it in my blood without knowing it. And again, like I was saying about like being a drummer, being a chef, like for me, like sensory creative things are just, that's who I am. Add into what I've learned over the years by working with people, and then being able to zoom out and see, okay, it's not just about this great shot, it's about telling the story of the day, it's about making sure everyone there is having a good time while telling stories. And then honestly, the fun personal stuff that I get to do photography wise fuels and keeps me, it's like, not even my favorite band, but I remember reading this Motley Crue Vince Neil interview when I was a teenager. Used to be when I was like 12, 13, right? At Circus magazine, and I'm reading this interview and they're like, so what do you listen to? And I forget the bands, but like none of it was metal, none of it was even rock. And I'm like, that's interesting. So, we have things that inspire us from everywhere. And, to me, so again, like I'm a drummer, I love progressive metal. I love drumming progressive metal. Why? Because it's all over the place. It's not just 1, 2, 3, 4. So that mental aspect is very similar to how I go about photography, and bells and whistles and 3 light setups and dangly things in front of the camera. So like, yes, I can do all that stuff, but I can also just take you outside with no lighting and just connect to you and, give them a little bit of a prompt. And, I could, take this one great photo with like great scenery and great lighting and whatever, but the couple's going to react to and respond to and connect to the photo of them showing emotion. So I'll get that same, I'm giving away one of my trade secrets right here. So I'll set up the scenery and the lighting and the exposure and check everything, and I'll take that shot and it's perfect. And then I'll go, oh, hey, by the way, grab his butt. And then they start laughing. And then I get that same picture. So they're still embraced, but they're laughing. And they're not going to see that photo and be like, oh, he told me to pinch his butt or whatever. But now there's a picture of them that's aesthetically pleasing and it's capturing who they are as people. So again, life, career, and then
like the intersection of life and career.
Yeah.
So we're just going to play Tool's Lateralis album for the rest of the interview.
Now you get it.
I get it.
Now you totally get
it. So I want to take a transition here. We've talked about you as a person. We've talked about how you've really started to find yourself, but I want to arrive at where you are today, because I think that's everything else is for naught if we don't talk about where it's gotten you today. A successful career. You're a happy, content, super genuine person, which I think that has come through. Your humility is really what makes listening to you talk so wonderful, is that you're not out here talking about yourself like I'm this and I'm that. You're a real person. You've been on the down, you've been on the up. You're figuring it out on your own. You're not classically trained. You went out there and you put yourself out there in a lot of situations that were uncomfortable, and realized that that's the only way that you're going to get better. And so with all that being said, I'm going to say it for you that you're a multiple award-winning photographer. Your work has received acclaim across the same sphere that you were once on the outside looking in, which I think is super cool. And I just want you to take a moment and let that sink in as we announce it here for the masses, that you're in that same position talking to people who were you a number of years ago, which has to be super cool. So let that sink in. And when it does, hopefully within the next 20 minutes or so.
Well, no, now I'm all tingly and fuzzy. Thanks. I'm serious.
Let's talk about where you are now, man. I mean, look, Magmod, huge brand,
Yeah.
The roster of MagMod ambassadors are the people who are taking the industry to the next level and constantly pushing the creative boundaries of what wedding photography is and has been and will continue to be. What does it mean to you to be in that position now? And how has that affected what you're doing on an everyday basis?
So I thought I'd say imposter syndrome like 90 times and it hasn't been enough. So I'm going to say it again now. Again, still have it. It was something, so MagMod, they had a form to fill out where actually it initially started where I would tag them in photos where I use their products and they shared one. And I was like deer in the headlights, right? But then they either created or I ended up finding they had a submission form where you could actually go and submit photos to them to review. And if they want to put them on Instagram, they would. So they did. And I kept getting stuff on their Instagram. And I remember initially reaching out, I don't know, a couple of years ago, like, hey, I'd love to be considered. I'd love to be considered. And at the same time going, but yeah, it's not going to happen. Like, I know this person, like there's a handful of people from my area, my like New Jersey, New York area who I know or have worked with or know of who are MagMod ambassadors. And I've always looked to those people like, wow, like I would love to be able to be where they're at doing what they're doing. And however it ended up working out, man, like they reached out to me and offered it to me. And I was just, I was floored. And, I think I mentioned this the other day when we chatted, but it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I put a post-it note on my monitor and said, how do I turn accolades into business? Not having accolades. And that was like what is that book called? The Gift. Long story short, like you just put out there, like, this is me. This is what even if you change the wording from this is what I want to this is what I am, this is who I am. So you start, instead of listening to that, well, I can't do this and no one's going to like that. Like if you can just let the words in your head go, I am this, I am that. And that's what that post-it note did for me, because yeah, in the last year and a half is when that ambassadorship happened and awards happened and everything happened, because I just put a post-it note and wanted to achieve, and here this is another part of the growth. So like I was saying, initially, I thought it was just about like making these spectacular, crazy portraits. And then I learned about bigger and bigger. Oh, there's way more to this, I don't even want to say industry. There's more to this service than giving people great portraits. So, friends, colleagues, people who around the world whose work always inspired me, and I would see them because here's awards galleries. And I'm like, man, that would be so cool. That would be so cool to be able to win one of those. And I ended up winning an award, and then looked through my process like backwards. And most of these photos are moments. It's storytelling. So sure, anyone would lie. I'm sorry. Anyone would be lying if they said when they first started out doing anything that they didn't want to be, you start a garage band, not the game, but like an actual garage band. And sure, you want to be the next Led Zeppelin or the next, I don't even know who's popular these days, but you know what I mean? So you
stick
set
with
up
Led Zeppelin.
yeah.
Oh, once great, always great.
So, everyone starts out with these super lofty dreams, and there's no reason to be ashamed of that. So sure, I wanted to be as good as these. So it's not that I wanted to win awards. I wanted to be as good as these people who are winning awards. And what those are, like, yeah, some of them are great portraits, but a lot of them are great storytelling images. So that's what I learned. And that's what drives me now is how do I get that, like I was saying before, that movie in a frame? How do I tell a whole story in one frame? And sure, like it's great that ends up yielding an award, but it's not shooting for the award. It's initially seeing that and wanting that is what led me to becoming a better storyteller, a better photographer.
And
So
I think that's healthy, because I think we look at awards as if the award itself is the goal, there's an argument to be made that said, all right, you might be in it for the wrong reasons, but the award is the validation of the work you're putting in. The award is something that says you are providing this service to your clients. You're providing dynamic memories. You are a wonderful storyteller. And I think it's all about the approach versus the actual, hey, here's an award up on the wall. I'm not just parading certificates and first places and all this stuff to say, look at me. I feel like with you, it's different. For you, this is that person who has really busted their butt to get where they are. This is a stamp saying, okay, you've made it. And even still, I'm going to say it for you this time because we haven't reached 90 times yet. Imposter syndrome. You say this all the time that you still have imposter syndrome and you're always going to have. And I think that's hunger. I think once we get complacent as artists, we take our foot off the gas. And I think that you showing up to a wedding and still being nervous is so relatable. People might not admit it, but I guarantee there's people out there who have been in the industry for 20, 30 years who are like, yep, every time I show up on a job, I get nervous day of. And the same thing, you raise your camera, it all disappears. You melt into the job itself or into what you're doing, and it goes away. But I think there's something to be said for still getting nervous and still having imposter syndrome.
Yeah, you had said something about, like finally making it or reaching that level of success. To me, there is no I've made it. There just isn't, because that would then bring complacency and paint by the numbers every time I show up at a wedding. Like, weddings are my high. Like, I cannot tell you how exhilarating it is. It's the energy, the energy, the range of energies and emotions. And I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be completely honest. I cry at every wedding I shoot.
That's
Like,
vulnerable. I love that.
whether it's during the ceremony or the speeches, or just something tender that happens early in the day, like during the first look, or if a bride does a first look with her dad, I will cry at least once at every wedding. And that's what shows me that I'm still me. I'm still doing this for the right reasons. And, anything else outside of that, and we'll stop talking about accolades, but like, accolades are great, but it's all that stuff that brings the human me into there. Like, if I'm that emotionally connected to the day, then yeah, I'm going to want to operate from an emotionally connected part of my person to that, so that I may as well be part of that day. As far as, I don't know if that makes any sense, but my energy then comes through in the photos, because my energy and my heart know, oh, I want to be here and capture this way. Or like I was saying about reading a room, like, I know something's going to go down over there. I need to get that. And I run and I dive and I lay on my stomach. And I shot my cousin's wedding 2 years ago. And all of my family were like, we had no idea you work so hard. Like, yeah, I run around like an idiot all day long. But that's what it takes. To me, that's what it takes. And like I said, it's my high. That's my, like, there's nothing like it. There is nothing like the roller coaster of a wedding day.
I think it's an immersive approach to telling the story and really grabbing that feeling and transporting somebody there. Because again, it always comes up aesthetic versus feeling an image versus looking at an image and be like, wow, that's a really cool shot. Or looking at the image that's just like, wow, it's arresting. It stops you. It might bring a tear to your eye. It makes you feel that moment. And I think that you being human and allowing yourself to cry, because that's something that, come on, how many wedding photographers, even if they felt it, would fight it and say, no, come on, I'm here to do it. And I think allowing yourself that emotion, that would make me want to hire you as a wedding photographer. I know that you're personally invested in my day, and all the other stuff, the technical, the planning, the preparation is not looked at as preparation and technical. It's looked at as, let me check these boxes off. Let me make that not even a thing so that I don't even have to worry about it, so that I can pour myself fully into this day. Me, the emotional person, the regular guy, Daniel Nydick, not looking at settings and this and that. That's all. Once you commit that to memory, I think we learn the technical aspect so that we can really learn to see and open our minds and our eyes up to really just take in the moment. And by you being that vulnerable on that day, I think that helps you create those images that you were talking about earlier. You were talking about capturing images that capture a feeling.
Like the
Fair?
whole, like, yeah, like I keep going back to that movie, telling, seeing a movie in one frame. Um, you know what it is, and I want it to, I want those images to hit you in the heart, or wherever it is they're supposed to hit you, whether it's a laugh or a laugh or just a warm feeling. It's there's got to be impact, and or else we're not doing it right. I had someone who I knew once, when I told them this is what I was getting into, this is what I was going to do, and their response was, yeah, but wedding photography is just like a step up from JCPenney photos. And I was like, no, 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 no.
Not when it's done right. I think it's so easy to package it up in this cliche genre thing. And at the end of the day, these are people's special moments. There are people who have waited their entire day for this life. There are people who it means more than just the day itself. It's about the union, it's about family. There's so many other emotions that are connected to that day that I think just doing it a disservice of saying, oh, it's just okay. Yeah. It's like going to remember the old Glamour Shot studios?
Yeah.
Shout out to New Jersey malls. Every New Jersey mall had a Glamour Shot studio, but it's way deeper than that. So as we start to wrap this up, Daniel, for those of you who are out there and the people who aren't where you are, the people who are in your shoes from years ago, where does it start? What advice do you have to find themselves? Because now we're in a different place than even when you and I started out. Now we're inundated. We have social media 24 hours a day where it's easy to confuse good influences with just random noise. Where do you suggest people go? Where's a place of inspiration where people can find themselves through their photography?
Wedding related or just in general?
Just in general.
Carry your camera with you. And when something speaks to you, so like that abandoned house photo that I took, like that very first photo that I took, um, if it's something that you're interested in, just carry the camera with you and start taking pictures. Just start to, honestly, I would just start taking pictures and then just look at them. We all do it with our phones, but there's a different process when you have an actual camera. Your brain slows down. There is intention, unless you have it set in, auto program, whatever mode. But once you have intention of, oh, but if I do this, it's going to make the picture look like this. You're going to take oh, this scene inspired me. I wanted to pull over here and take this photo, or, this picture of my speakers on my desk here. But then once you start, that first point and shoot that I had, all right, second point and shoot I had, it had manual adjustments. So I'd sit there and like look at the live view and like, well, shutter speed makes it look like this and ISO makes it do this. And like, I feel like it's the two together. And once those merge, the driving around with the camera, walking around with the camera and just taking pictures of things, putting them up on your screen, finding out what you like and don't like about it, and being okay that you might hate it. Like it's riding a bike. I don't know if that really answers it, but to me, it just was about just taking photos and taking photos and taking photos. And it was that, and just being honest with yourself about it, being okay that something didn't work. And then, Google is your friend if there's something you're with. But it's hard to tell you how to get inspired, but if you are. So I'll say it again, like, forget the imposter syndrome, look at this amazing whatever that this guy did in 1960, and I'll never be like that. Like, forget all of it. Like, I'm like Derek, I'm never going to be you. Like, I'm never going to shoot the stuff you shoot the way you shoot it. like I was saying, I talk through my process with anyone who works with me, because yeah, they might learn something, but they're not going to be me. They're going to be them. So don't be afraid to find your voice. Don't be afraid to suck. Like if it's not great at first, like dude, again, so Led Zeppelin, like they weren't 5 years old and able to do what they were doing. Just don't beat yourself up and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Like I said, I joined that group and was totally afraid to interact at first because who am I? I'm going to a workshop next week, and with people who I know, and it's an international photographer, and these people I know, I told them, like, I'm having imposter syndrome. I don't even want to go, and they're like, we all have imposter syndrome. It's okay. And these are people who have been doing it longer than me and more successful. Like I'd love to be like them, and they're telling me they still have imposter syndrome. I'm like, all right, so it's okay. So just show up, even if it's an internal thing while you're out taking photos of mountains or whatever it is, just be okay with the process and be okay that if it didn't work this time, what did they say about Thomas Edison and the light bulb? Like if he didn't try like that 101th time, then he never would have gotten it.
Mm.
So if you like it, just do it. Just do it.
I love that. And I think it's about your humility, just who you are as a person. It's funny that that came up in this whole thing, was about, who you are as a person and learning, hey, Daniel, the person, not Daniel, the vendor, is what makes this comfortable. And I think that's what ultimately comes across in this is, in talking to you for the past hour, it's who you are as a person. We didn't show a single image. We
No.
didn't show a single lighting diagram. We didn't do any of that. It was really just, but I'd be hard pressed to find a single person watching or listening right now who doesn't feel something. It was like, wow, I really like this guy. I like your approach. It's so natural. And I think that is what is going to help so many people get past where they're at, because we get stuck in our heads. We really do. We are our own worst enemies. I do want to throw out a special shout out from Andrew E. watching on Vimeo and Nikki Halter watching on YouTube, who say hello and congrats and all that good stuff. They're enjoying the conversation.
Thank you,
But
guys.
you're an inspiration, man. And that's, I'll say it again, that's why we're on speaking right now, because I think that you have such a cool story and such a cool approach. And these are the voices that need to be magnified in this industry, are the people who, they fought their way up through the ranks and they still just want the spotlight shined somewhere else. You don't want the spotlight on you. You just really, you want to talk about what you do and what you're passionate about. And you have such a pure love for life and photography. And I think that's what came across in the past hour. So I want to thank you for your time, your wisdom, your expertise, and just being you, man. It's
Thank you.
conversations like this that really, these are going to move the needle more than any 5 tips and tricks or any of that technical stuff we get caught in, on a day-to-day basis. I think it's cool to have simple, real, open conversations and to be vulnerable. And I think you're really a voice in the face of vulnerability in an industry that is driven by everything else. It's not a vulnerable industry, and you've
Yeah.
made it a little more vulnerable today. So I want to thank you for that, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you. No, this is wonderful.
Well, wow. I feel like I'm gonna cry. Yeah.
I'm
Hair
tearing up a
standing
little
up
bit.
on my arms. Hurry and cut it. Danny, see any tears, cut it. No, I do really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, man. This was super cool. And to be sitting here talking to you right now in front of everybody and remembering all the conversations we've had over the years. And again, to see your growth as a person, as a photographer, as somebody who's inspiring. We started this thing out talking about how you got started. And guess what? I got started driving around random roads in Hunterdon County too.
Ah,
And I think back and it's like, neither of us started doing what we are doing now. Today was never even, it wasn't on the goal list, what we're
yeah.
doing right now. And yet we're here and we found our way. So for anybody out there, it doesn't matter if you're lost today, if you don't have any direction, if you don't have any goals. It's like Daniel said, success isn't a destination. I know we so often use it as a cliche, but it really is about the ride. You have to enjoy the journey. You have to appreciate the ride. And you have to stay driven, because you may not have success today or tomorrow or 3 years from now, but 10 years from now, 15 years from now, you might just have that aha moment and realize, like, this is what I'm doing because I love it, and I found myself.
And I offer one last thing.
Go for it. This is your show, man.
So this will help, whether it's photography or your help in your life, which will then help whatever it is that drives you. Don't tell yourself you need this house and this fence and this car and this everything to make you happy. Just want to be happy. Don't believe that you need this to be successful. Success is whatever it is, whatever it means to you. But like, don't think I have to photograph like this guy, or I have to be able to have this skill or whatever. Just make it about what makes you happy. And that, so I found my excitement as I started shooting weddings. I mean, we already talked about how I started it before, but this keeps exciting me and it keeps inspiring me. So I just keep telling myself, do what makes me happy. And if I'm doing what makes, if what that is weddings, that's what the universe is giving me, because I asked it, or I told it, I want to be happy. I don't need something hard set to tell me what happiness is. Let happiness come to me in the shape that it will. And I'm pretty darn happy right now.
There you go. Do what makes you happy. Happiness doesn't have a shape. I love it. Michelle joining us on YouTube says, such a great conversation. Daniel is so inspiring and real. Thank you. And I think that's the perfect way to end it. Inspiring, real, heartfelt. We need more of that. So huge thank you to Daniel Nydick for joining us in today's conversation. To all of our viewers out there watching, listening, no matter how you're taking it in. It's all good. We do it for you. Can't do it without you. But that's it. Another round of the B&H virtual event space is in the books. We'll catch you on next time.